This is deep dish, right?
Yeah, well, let's get deep.
So I'm going deep on both sides.
Mina, welcome to the platform. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. And I'm really excited about I'm usually always excited about conversations, but I'm even more excited about things that I personally don't know much about.
All right. All right.
You've experienced some things personally that I just haven't experienced, and I think many people probably personally don't even have a lot of proximity to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why I think this conversation is gonna be super important, informative, but also to hear it from somebody that has experienced it and be able to take us and myself through the journey and how that plays into your work and everything. So thank you.
Of course. Of course. Frankly, I'm honored.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. There's a lot of impressive people to me that come on here, so hopefully I live up to it.
Well, you're a part of the list. So just tell us a little bit about like who Mina is, your upbringing, and kind of how that influenced a little bit of who you are.
Sure. Yeah. So I always tell people I moved here to Nashville when I was one or two.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't remember.
Okay. You're from here. You're from here.
I always like to get it out there. Some people draw issue with it,
No,
but
you're
I
from
want
here.
to make sure that I make the caveat. So yeah, I grew up here, and I both of my parents. Well, I should say my father and mother moved down here. I have a sister. Grew up, and my father worked in the music business. My mother stayed at home, and yeah, it was. I was about to say a good upbringing. It was an interesting upbringing, which is a very loaded term for the
Right.
most part. So yeah, I went to school here. I went to college in Knoxville, came back here, and it's so interesting because when I was in high school, I was like, oh my God, Nashville! I don't think I want to live here for the rest of my life. There's not that much going on. And keep in mind, this was 2010.
Right.
So, and if you remember, there was a giant flood that happened, I believe in 2009. It might have been 2010.
It was 2010.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure. And that truly, it really changed everything in Nashville. I draw a lot of the change that's going on right now, whether it be the gentrification, the expansion, everything like that, to that flood. And I went off to college, went there for 4 years, came back, and, I would come back in the summers and things would be
Right.
a little different here and there. And when I was in high school, I was like, I don't want to live here because there's not that many folks my age. I didn't know what I would do for work. And I mean, I don't know what I would want to do for work now, despite the fact that I have a job. But I graduated, and when I came back here, it was everything was different. There was a whole bunch of new people here.
Yeah.
There was new businesses, new restaurants, new opportunities. There was all sorts of development going on. And I was like, well, let me, I guess, give it a shot here, and I'll keep going. And then, I stayed here ever since. And I'm glad that I did, because I really, really love this city. Of course, every city has issues, and that includes Nashville. But I love living here in Nashville. I love living in the South, in the Southeast. It's better than any other place I've visited in the country, frankly. And I have decided to stay as much as Tennessee will have me. And yeah, so I started, I guess, what one might call a career. And, had an office job. It was fine. Ended up moving to a different office job, and still have that office job. And during that time, a couple things happened. In 2016, I joined the Democratic Socialists of America in October of 2016.
Okay.
And then following that, in December of 2016, me and a bunch of scruffy socialists all met in a bar, and we're like, what do we do? Because everything seems so different with Trump getting elected, and we have to do something. And that we have to do something sort of mentality can be
Right.
good and bad. And then we just decided, well, we're all in DSA. Let's try and start this. And then we've been here forever since. So in December, it will be, I guess, our 6-year anniversary as a chapter, which is really exciting. I guess that makes me a founder of the chapter.
Yeah,
I
for
currently
sure.
serve on our elected leadership. I am on the steering committee. I am the chair of membership. In the past, we also have a national organization, so that's what I mean when I joined DSA. It's currently 90,000 members strong all across the country, chapters in every single state.
Wow.
With, growing every single day, which is really nice. And yeah, I've served on leadership. We've had just a ton of growth and expansion and projects and change, and it's been a wonderful thing to be a part of. And then obviously, one of the things that I put on here is that I transitioned. So back in, back in 2018 is when I started transitioning. I believe it was March of 2018.
And just for like clarity, transitioning from you was assigned male.
I was assigned male at birth, and then I transitioned. I'm a trans woman. I prefer to just call myself a woman. The trans part's not terribly important to me.
Okay.
But I do leverage it a lot to get into some spaces where I can talk on podcasts.
Right.
Well, look. Or give speeches or whatever. But I do have to say before you start, because you already know that I listen to the podcast.
Right.
And I listened to some of the ones where you talk to people like Gert, and who is a very good friend of mine. And I remember like you asking this question or expressing not very much a frustration, but like a desire to be like, I wish there was a trans person or like a place where I could ask questions where there wouldn't be judgment or wouldn't be like, somebody like jumping down your throat. And buddy, I'm here. I'm here to answer your questions, and I am more than happy. Let's just dig our hands down in the mud. And
Mina, I'm so glad that you said that, because I was going to have them. I'm going to have them anyway.
Regardless.
But regardless, because I don't, whether people want to admit it or not.
Sure.
Right. Like it could be a scary thing, especially how you may see other people that may identify with your gender are treated when they do ask something, and not intentionally trying to be like harmful, but they just don't know, and terminology could get lost. And I know Gert, like for example, and like Brianna, like they corrected me on several times, because like it's a learning environment. I don't mind, because I want to make sure like I'm not unintentionally harming.
You don't want to be rude,
and I want to be rude, and all of those things, right? So so thank you. It's going to be another masterclass for myself and others.
I won't call myself an expert, but I do have one of the most loathsome terms that I have that I hear these days is lived experience.
Yes, well, and
it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of misconceptions, and I try to be like as gentle or as respectful that I can, because did you grow up knowing a transgender person?
I did not.
Exactly. Especially a lot of folks in the South with like a lot of like ingrained conservatism or homophobia. Even if you grew up in a liberal family, like that's not something a lot of people experience. There are 4% of people within the United States that was polled back in 2016 that identified as something like transgender, non-binary, all these sorts of things. So that's a small population. And of course, you may not know that somebody is, or you may not know because they were, it happened later in life. So I try to be as gentle as possible, because I have coworkers where like I'm the first person they've ever met like me.
That's really amazing of you, and kind, and patient. I think too, to be with people and understanding like this is a new experience for some folks, and it may be a lot to take in, rightfully so or wrongfully so. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, you talking about like not wanting to offend people, not knowing. I mean, to me that comes from like a very deep, like nice, kind place, because you don't want to hurt somebody. And like that should be, you shouldn't tolerate disrespect, but disrespect to me comes from it comes from a position of bad faith. It comes from a position of faith. And of course, there's such a thing as like debate and pushback and stuff like that. But in the end, like when I have people ask me questions, like sometimes they can be a little prying and a little grating. But for the most part, people just like don't know what it's like, don't know what to say, don't know how like that goes. Like I had this experience, like I have gotten like frustrated and depressed at my day job. Like I said, I came out on my day job and I actually moved jobs to come out there because I knew this about myself. But the job that I was working at the time, I knew for a fact wasn't a great place to come out at because somebody else had and I saw what they had experienced. And that's really frustrating. And moreover, that was like a summer hire. It was somebody's kid. And so like having like a coworker's child transition and then people not be at the very least like curious, like self-critical, or like just be kind of rude and in some cases mean, like I knew that like this wasn't a good thing for me. I'd already sort of like committed myself to try and find another place. And I moved to my current job. I waited for the like 60-day waiting probationary period. And I was like, all right, let's figure out how to do this, talk to my bosses, and then kind of just figured out what to do because there was no manual on how to handle this sort of thing. There's not many of us even, right now.
And so I want to peel back a little bit.
Go for it.
And talk about your upbringing a little bit more. Growing up, when did you know, like, hey, I'm a woman?
That,
or did that come later, or what was that process for you?
It's interesting because there is a preconceived notion that like every trans person, it dawns on them like when they're a child, like I'm in the wrong body, which I also don't prefer that type of that line really, but you have this like light switch moment. It's like, oh my gosh, this isn't the case. I grew up the wrong way, or like I wish I could be something else. And like that I wish I could be something else was like it was kind of like in the background at the entire time. Like I grew up, I was depressed, anxious, at some point suicidal, and I couldn't really like understand why. And at some point I was just like purely numb, just could not feel anything, just purely just like go to work, go to school, go to bed, just not having a great time in my life, and could never figure out why. And I think it kind of speaks to what you have experienced, and frankly what I experienced too, is I didn't know anything about this. Like I grew up here, I didn't hear anything. I knew gay people, and that wasn't a terribly hard concept to understand. Like I didn't have a religious upbringing, so I didn't really have any sort of like slight against the gay community or anything like that. It was really just like, well, it's none of my business. Why do I care? I also learned just like, well, I also like, I like interesting and attractive people. So, I knew at some point that I was bisexual, but once again, that's nobody's business who I date or who I get into a relationship with. And it really didn't dawn on me, I think, until I was, how old was I? I probably was 20. I was probably 25 at the time when it really dawned on me. And it really was a result of doing activism and organizing, because I did encounter like trans people and like the issues of being a trans person just sort of generally, not even alone in the United States. And that's where I got kind of curious, and I became, this is something that you see kind of often. It's like you see people who are like really huge supporters that are of the transgender cause, like liberation, that are very interested, know a lot of stuff about it. And then slowly time progresses on and they're like, maybe I identify with this so much because I want to know more about it. I want to experience it. And then sure enough, maybe a year goes by and it's like, oh God. And I had that moment, that light switch moment that I was talking about. I didn't have it when I was 10 or 11.
Right.
I had it when I was 25.
And so like from your childhood, adolescent to young adult to adult at like 25, what was growing up like? Were you purely, boys' clothes, boys' activities. Like when I say boys, like typical,
Sure, yeah.
type of
Yeah,
boys,
stereotypical stuff.
stereotypical stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was all just like, play sports, have friends, video games, all that sort of stuff. And I was kind of a shithead when I was a kid too. That's one thing too that I always hate is like I hate this sort of like idea of like, oh, they're always just this sort of like effete type young person that thinks they're a boy, and then later on, they go through all these motions and then they realize, oh, at one point, like this all makes sense. No, I was absolutely an idiot. I was such a bad kid. Thankfully, never got arrested, but but I had like a masculine upbringing, and I was depressed, but I just didn't have that, like, I didn't have the language to describe what I was feeling.
Yeah.
And that was such a huge thing a huge thing for me that like, I don't know what this is. I didn't even know that this was a thing that one could do. Cause you see like in the media, you see people who like cross dress, you see people, you see kind of like stereotypical, in some cases, offensive representations of trans women and sometimes trans men, and trans men less than trans women. It's more often than not trans women, but and
which is interesting, which is one of the things I want to talk about too.
Yeah. So once I started learning about this and I started reading and listening to people and like having conversations with people and having conversations with the women in my life at the time. And it was a really enlightening experience. And frankly, like what I was just talking about of like having like the stereotypical like transgender experience of like knowing when you're a kid and then not being able to fully blossom until you're older, like that really wasn't the case for me. Like I didn't know until later, and once I did, like I had to do a lot of thought about it, and it caused a lot of rifts in my life. Like I don't talk to my father anymore. I only talk to my sister now, and I don't have a ton of family left, but I do, and they don't talk to me either. And like I have like mixed feelings over that, but I also know that like I also made that decision just as much as they made the decision to have some sort of prejudice against this, of just, I don't suffer this type of disrespect from anybody on the street. So why the fuck would I suffer it from somebody who purports to love me? Yeah. And if that's going to be the case, then I need to put my foot down and just say like, look, if you want to have a relationship with me, you need to be respectful. And moreover, like at this point, like if my parents or any part of that family like wants to like start mending or start those conversations, like a formal apology is required for me to start that sort of thing. And like once again, like I don't tolerate that sort of thing. And I don't think that the majority of people have like malice in their heart when they ask me questions. But once you start understanding like, this person's supposed to love me. I was always supposed to be this person's child, not their imagination of what they wanted me to be. Right. And that's where you have to draw the line.
And it's just so heartbreaking to hear, because I think that's a theme, whether you know somebody or not, that you hear, whether it's through entertainment, media, about like the repercussions that come from just coming out, and from family and friends and people that you thought were always gonna love you no matter what, and they just loved you because you were you, and whatever version of you, that whether it's a good version or whether that's, even if you was doing criminal shit, they loved you, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. Is like I wonder for you. I know you like fuck them at this particular moment, right?
Sure.
But do you give them a little grace due to maybe just ignorance?
Yeah, it's hard to say whether or not it's ignorance, because both of my parents grew. They both worked in the music industry. They both worked in the music industry in the 70s and 80s. And when you're working in the music industry in the 70s and 80s, you're going to encounter a lot of, let's say, odd people, and that includes transgender people. Like, even though the nomenclature might have changed, like we may not have people as much who identify as, like, say, like a transvestite or something like that, you still would have encountered those types of things. And moreover, like, this was what you're talking about, of like giving people grace and things like that. That did happen, but I also did this kind of like arithmetic in my head, and it's funny. One of the conversations that I had with my father one time before I had came out to him, I knew, but we went out to lunch one time, and I started telling him this story about this transgender person that I worked with, kind of reiterating the story that I was talking about with you. Mm-hmm. And I was relaying this to him, and, you know, at the time, like, he had a very, like, visceral reaction to it. And he was like, that's so terrible. And he started describing to me, like, a situation where one of his best friends from when he lived in Minnesota, one of his nieces or nephews, I don't remember, had came out and was transgender, and my father's friend forbid this child from going to the wedding, of his daughter. And my father approached him about this and was like, George, you know that this is messed up. This is not okay. And when he told me that story, like, I kind of, like, a flame, like, burst into my heart. I'm like, oh my God, like, this might be okay.
Right.
This might be okay. And I was so confident about it. And, like, it took me a while to, like, actually work up the courage to do it and, like, tell him. And at first he responded very, like, numbly. And then after that, like, things progressed worse and worse.
Wow.
So I think I do give people grace. I do have some humility and like some understanding that people don't know how to deal with these things. And, like, I speak with my mother very, very infrequently. Like, on I think the last time I spoke with her on the phone was on my birthday in July, and before then it had been several months. So and to be fair, my mom left when I was 10. So I didn't have, like, a solid, like, consistent relationship with her. I would see her maybe, like, once or twice a year. Mm-hmm. So the distance, I think, kind of helped. But yeah, providing grace and humility, I think, is important. But also not to tolerate stuff from the people who are supposed to love you. And I do what you're talking about extending it. I will say I have constant inner, like, turmoil about that, because I do love my parents, and in some cases, like, I have, like, in my head, like, I thank my father for, like, the person that I am, because for better for worse, like, he did a lot of good, he did a lot of bad, he said a lot of great things, he said a lot of bad things, but he raised me to be the person that I am now. Right. He raised me to work very hard and be very diligent and be very understanding and loving and respectful and loyal. And at the same time, you know, everybody falters, but it's important when you falter to apologize for those mistakes. My father has never been one to apologize for his mistakes.
And so I'm going to move forward a little bit, then I'm going to come back.
All right, go for it.
Organizing.
Go for it.
How did that play, right, into
transitioning?
Yeah, to transitioning, and also just how did you get involved into organizing in the first place? I know you said your parents is in music, so how did that, like, happen? And you know, I know that, and I know that's different for different people, right?
Sure,
some people have, like, family members that, you know, marched and did all these amazing things. You know, or you can be like me. Well, my family, like, didn't really, like, have ordinances in, like, that typical sense of, like, community and organizing and fighting for social justice. And it just happened, you know, for me. And so what is that story for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna answer your second question before I come back to the first. So, you know, it was really interesting, like, because I really got radicalized in 2016. But to even go further back than that, like, my parents and family were good liberals. Like, they always voted Democrats. They were always, you know, trying to be interested and push back against, racism, sexism, homophobia in whatever little way that they could. And, that instilled in me like a sense of social justice. And then when 2016 came around, like I'm, 2 years out of college, and I'm starting to get interested in this more for some reason or another, really. And I really like kind of took a shine to the Bernie Sanders campaign. I thought our good boy Bernard has some good ideas in politics.
Right.
So, started following it. And then when he got knocked out of the race, I was stunned by it. But, and then when Trump got elected, it was like, the world is so different. And I felt like if I'm going to be in a socialist organization, because this was October, like I need to live up to it. Like I can't just be a paper member. Like I actually need to like take part in this because shit's about to go down.
Right.
And I remember having a conversation with my girlfriend at the time of just like waking up the next morning and feeling like shell shocked. And she was like, why? Like, what's the big deal? I'm like, you have no idea what's about to happen. And then following that, like I just decided to start looking into it and started getting interested in like more socialist politics and seeing other places across the country and, just realizing like, yeah, like people should have healthcare. People should have housing. People should not be like tormented and murdered by the police. We shouldn't have this like global, like expanding military and this exploitation. And then got involved like in December 2016, like I was talking about. And then to return to your first question, transitioning in the organizing community among like truly who the people like I call my friends and yes, my comrades.
Yeah.
It was one of the easiest parts of the entire transition process.
Wow.
And it was funny because like there were people who I was really close to at the time who knew. And, I came out to them in September of 2018. It's funny, I didn't realize how much these dates have imprinted upon me. It was the last Wednesday of September 2018, because that's when we have our general meetings. And I made not even really an announcement. I was leading the general meeting, I was facilitating, and towards the end, I asked people to come to this rally that was happening about transgender rights. And that was something that and then I explained, like, I am one of these people, and like, this is going to be extremely important about whether or not people like me can exist in the future.
Wow.
And like, even though I wasn't like, I was saying it without saying it. Like I was like, I'm coming out to you as a trans person. Like I'm a woman, actually. You might have known me as this. But I had already come out to some people who were like, who I was close to and who were members in the chapter. People came up to me afterwards and were like, oh my God, I didn't know. I'm so happy for you. And like, I'll be there. And then sure enough, they showed up. I gave a speech and then kind of just went from there. It became really easy. A lot of people were just like, I know you had Jorge on here and he does stuff with workers' dignity. And at the time, that was like one of the most like, it was funny. It was one of the more like novel experiences because of how like just nothing it was. Because I went to workers' dignity. I was helping doing some like phone banking or something like that for a fundraiser. And when I went there, I like had a conversation with somebody who was a leader there at the time. And when I told them, I'm like, I don't like, stammering like I am now. And I was like, I need you to know that like, you've known me for years, but I'm actually a trans woman. Like I'm trying to come out to you right now. And they're like, okay, is there something else? And I was like, no, that's it. And they're like, okay, well, here's your phone banking sheet. I mean, the bathroom's right there. Like everything, like literally nothing about it changed. Every so often you'd get a misgender or something like that, but people would correct themselves, but they wouldn't fall over themselves and like, do this liberal like apologetics or something like that. It is so interesting in what what inspires me about being involved in organizing, and something that like makes me believe that I'm never going to get out of the game, because like these are the people who helped raise me from like the pit that I was in at the time, and how just miserable I was.
Wow, that's like I've never had, not that I know of, because
Sure.
it could have, but I've never had anyone come out to me like in that public, in that like intimate way.
Yeah.
But I would probably be one of those people like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, okay, well,
Yeah.
thanks. Nothing changes for me, you
Yeah.
know, and whatever support, whatever, just let me know. And yeah.
It was fun because because I hadn't even changed I hadn't even like figured out what name I was going to change my name to. So I was still going by my older name.
Okay.
And
Can we ask what your older name was? Is something you want to
no.
share? Okay.
We
Okay.
can talk about that in a second. But in December of that year, in 2018, I decided to throw a party because I had figured out the name that I wanted to use. And I was like, let's have a name day party. Like, fuck it. Like, let's throw a rager. Like, and let's do this thing like proper, because like this to me is like, this is the motherfucking gender reveal party of the lifetime. I can drink. And it was a whew, that was a night. And it was a great time, when midnight hit, I had like I didn't even have a speech prepared or something like that. So I, got everybody into the living room, like cramming like 40 people into the shithole that I was living in at the time. And I was just like, all right. And like people were coming up to me all night and were like, can you just tell me? I'm like, no, you gotta guess. And, finally, and, had a big thing, and it was Mina, and, just the fucking house roared, and it was awesome. And it was like one of the most like revitalizing experiences of my life, because you have all of these people around you that like love you and care about you and like want to treat you right, and like have this like truly, to me, like how these things should be treated, of just like, this is awesome. Like, this isn't like a, some like therapists and things like that will tell trans people that like, you need to be patient with the people in your life, because it's like, you need to think of it as like the death of a family member. And to me, that's like one of the most horrific things that you can say, because in effect, what you're saying is you murdered this person, and that's going to be on your conscience. And to me, it's like, well, I mean, I'm not related by blood to any of these people, but I consider a lot of them my siblings, my brothers, my sisters, the people who I would, go to the barricades for, like, to the hilt.
Right.
And decided to do it as best as I could, and had a wonderful time. But to your question about like an older name, so I don't know if you're familiar with this concept of it. I don't know. It's more colloquial. It's called a dead name.
No, I'm not familiar.
So the dead name is sort of like it's a concept within kind of like the broader like transgender community. So like when you imagine it's like misgendering somebody.
Okay.
But a lot of people find it hurts them worse when you do it, because it's just like it reminds you of this. And it's funny because like especially with how technical society is, like it's like whack-a-mole, like trying to find all of these places that I have my old names at, of just like mailing lists that I signed up for when I was like 18, and I still am signed up to it for some damn reason. And it's like, well, why did you another one? I'm 30. How did I miss it? And then, when it comes to like technology at your job, it's like, well, we can't change it in this one place. And I'm like, can you really not fucking change it?
Is your name Mina
everywhere?
Everywhere, legally,
birth certificate, social security number, all from tip to toe. It is Mina. Yes, Mina Laszlo Shed.
What are some, because we're here in the South.
Yeah,
right?
Go for it.
We're here in the South. Have you ever not felt safe?
Oh, yeah.
And what did that look like for you? What was that experience or experiences for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it still happens. Right. Like, there's still you kind of got to keep your head on a swivel. Like, and it's not just like, regular everyday jagoffs that will like come up and yell at you, or like yell at you across the street or something like that. And I've had those experiences of just like being in a parking lot, and then like I pull up and like I'm in a dress and like have my makeup on and my purse, and then all of a sudden a woman will yell a slur at me from like literally like 10 feet away, and I'm like, okay, lady, and then you just continue your life,
Right.
Because like I'm not about to catch a case for this woman,
Right.
but it can be hard. Like there have been, I was coming back from a conference that was happening in Alabama, that was like sort of like a Southern Unity conference for DSA chapters, and when I was coming back, we had to stop at a gas station. And you stop at a gas station, and all of their memorabilia and stuff like that from the outside, you can kind of get the vibe. The Trump flags, the Make America Great Again, the the Republican stuff, the guns don't kill people, I kill people type sign. And it's like, oh shit, I'm in the wrong place. Right. But and then you have to do like the personally humiliating thing of like, well, I have to like use the men's bathroom now and butch myself up in order to like pass through it, because there have been times where like people have had to do like size you up and be like, are you just look feminine, or are you? And it's like, I don't want to have that conversation with somebody, because I know it could like engender some issues. So and being in the South, to me, like I said, I love living here. It's like I've never been able to leave the country, but I have found that like living here, like visiting Atlanta, has been like some of the best experiences of my life. But there have been situations that have been like sort of like subtly, like I need to have somebody who has my back, whether that's like another woman, or I need to call upon some of my men in my life and be like, can you like go to the grocery store with me, or like, can you? And sometimes it's like, this is something that it's hard. Like, am I imagining this, or is this the reality? Like, I need somebody to stay with me at this bar, or like I need somebody to help me like do this booking, or like be there for something like that. Or just like literal, like I will admit. I've gotten some very explicit death threats, like in person and online. Like the worst one that ever happened to me that actually caused me to move was I got dressed and I went outside, and there was a bullet on my porch standing up, and I got the message. I was like, I need to get the fuck out of here. So I moved.
Wow.
Yeah. And what's even funnier? I don't know which part it was for, because it could have been for the transgender stuff. It could have been for the opposing white supremacy stuff. It could have been for the socialism stuff. It could have been for the breakup that I just had. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get the hell out of here.
That's wild. So question.
Go for it.
I'm just curious. And not like, I don't even know what I would do. But like, your bathroom preference.
Sure.
Like, so is it just either or for you, or depending on the space?
No, I always use the women's bathroom.
Okay.
I always use the women's bathroom. Like thankfully I was able to convince the place that I work of like, I put my foot down. I'm like, I'm not going to use the men's bathroom. Like, come on guys. Like, and there was a point in time, like, let's say like 2019 was probably when like I stopped like feeling like I needed to. And like sometimes you'll get weird looks, but oftentimes it's like, I'm 6 feet tall, I have long red hair, and it is often like a woman just looking at me of just like, holy shit, you're tall. So you don't often meet a 6 foot tall woman. So like have you had any issues in the bathroom with other women? Nah, never. And even then I am. It's hard to say like what I would do at this point. I would likely just like ignore it, or just like move on. I would more than likely just not respond to it, because I'm not in a situation like if I'm out on a date, or if like I'm out at the movie theater or whatever the hell it might be. Like, I'm not about to like get into this with some woman, but thankfully, like, that experience hasn't happened to me, but I know that that's certainly like not the case for everybody. Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to get into this next portion, and then I want to get into some like more organizing community
Go
stuff.
for it.
But I'm taking my chance right now.
Go for it.
So I want to talk about like that transition.
Go for
Because
it.
I know you started a fundraiser for it and everything.
Oh, wow. You saw that.
I did my research, Mina.
All right.
I seen it, so I was amazed. Like, oh shit, she did a whole fundraiser, and everything. And so, and I want to know about like that too. But, take us through that journey of transitioning from biological,
Sure.
Because mentally you already transitioned, right?
Yeah.
You always been a woman.
Yes.
Physically, it's a different thing.
Physically, well, different thing is kind of hard. So
Okay, yeah.
This is something.
Break that down to us.
Yeah, so this is actually something that like I even have to talk, because I work at a medical school. I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I just am an administrative assistant. But I do often, like, there are students who do research projects in our program, and actually I spoke with one just a couple days ago who is doing research on the transgender community, and we had this conversation about gender and sex and the difference between the two. And this is something that a lot of people like have an idea of. Like, they've made the first step of like, gender is not sex. Gender is is the way that you feel. Sex is the way that you are. But
let's talk about it.
But I really hate to throw a hammer at the class. The sex part isn't easy or immutable either. Okay. So let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Though.
Because let me tell you what I think like sex is, right? Because I think they're different. I think sex and gender is different. And not from how you broke it down, but more so sex is from a chromosomal biology, because science thing, from how we understand science, male and female, right? That's when I think about sex. And gender is something that is more broad than sex. I think sex is concrete due to science. Gender is whatever you identify, whatever terminology you want to use.
Cultural.
And cultural. It can be, I think, even for me, that terminology has increased over the years in that understanding, instead of being just binary, kind of how, you know, most of us, like
interchangeable
boy, girl, it's interchangeable terms, right? Yeah. And so that's how I see it, and that's how I know to understand it.
Yeah. So sex is, once again, not a simple thing, because it's funny whenever, I don't get into arguments online, because like that's boring. I have much more better things to do. But I find that, and through research, through discussion, through like talking to experts in the field, because I have that opportunity to, like, sex even among humans is complicated in the way that we kind of smear everything together and just say like, well, there's just a man and he's got a penis, and then there's feet, and then there's a woman and she has a vagina. Not the case. Like, so take, for example, intersex people. Intersex people can be born with ambiguous genitalia. Right. Intersex people can be born with different chromosomes. Intersex people can have all sorts of different things. And oftentimes there is a form of, especially when children are born, the parents oftentimes choose, and then later on in life, this intersex person will go to a doctor visit and realize, I lived my entire life as a man, but I have ovaries, and nobody ever told me about this. So there are, I believe, 22 currently identified different, what one would call like sexual mutations or something like that. Okay. And at the very least, and this was based off of a study that was done quite a while ago, 0.1% of the human population is intersex. Okay. I don't know my chromosomes. Do you?
No.
Okay. So you very well, there are men who are born with a penis, who have lived their entire life, who have facial hair, who have all this sort of presentation, who have double X chromosomes. Same thing with women. There are some women who are born with XY chromosomes, and They just don't know it until later on. Maybe they're given a blood test or doing some sort of like genomic test, and they realize, holy shit, this is different.
Right.
Or you didn't realize, like, when you were born, you had some sort of ambiguous genitalia and somebody made a choice for you. And there's all sorts of like different things. And like I said, if you can imagine, say you did an examination, you took the composition of the entire Earth's crust, and you decided, okay, everything less than 0.1%, I don't care about. That we just don't consider it.
Right.
What would not be considered in that parameter is carbon.
Right.
As humans are very basic building blocks of life. Without carbon, we are carbon-based human beings.
Right.
We would not exist.
Right.
So that's what I mean when I say sex is not immutable. It's a lot more complicated in the same way that like even other forms of animals' biology is a lot more complicated.
Right.
So it's something that like sort of to like lay people, like it is like you're either a man or you're a woman, you either have a penis, you have a vagina, and that's it. And gender expression and sex being two different things. And for some people, they use it interchangeably. And to me, that's, obviously incorrect. And the same thing with gender being a cultural thing, sex, because science is in some ways imprecise. It is always changing and growing, and we're learning more and things like that. So
Right.
we'll learn even more. And
Right.
I forgot what your original question was.
Well, no. And you have me thinking about the whole sex thing and how the intersex and chromosomes and
Maybe I lied to you
Yeah.
that I was a trans woman. Maybe I made
Yeah.
up all this shit.
maybe
Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay,
I
exactly.
I don't.
It's nobody's business.
No,
It's nobody's business but the woman that I have sex with.
and like why am I blanking on his name? Joseph was on here. It's like, hey, a lot of people may be a little bit too concerned about other people's anatomy, like body anatomy, right? But the question, no, when I was answering something, I was telling you about sex and how like that makes sense though.
Yeah.
Like that makes sense that because it's so many of us, we all unique. It makes sense that I might have a chromosome that's different here and there, and it is what it is. Which I think it's pretty awesome, pretty amazing.
Sure. Your
yeah.
original question
But
was about my
transition.
transition, the medical, the
yeah.
biological.
Yeah. So
I gave you permission to ask me these questions just in case one of your viewers gets pissed. I gave Jerome permission. All right.
And this is a safe, brave space, people. This is a safe, brave space, civil space.
Yes. We got a couple brave people in the room
right
now.
a couple brave people.
We'll see who calls Uncle first.
Right.
So let's get into it.
Take us through it.
So in May of 2018 is when I first started hormone replacement therapy, otherwise known as HRT.
Okay.
So for me, I took estrogen. So that would be what is kind of like colloquially understood as more of a feminine hormone. And I also took spironolactone, which helps with hair growth as well. Which I was never particularly a hairy person anyways, but it helps. It helps with sort of like softening skin. It does change your hair texture too. So with a lot of men, predominantly, they have what's called terminal hair. So it's kind of that like, your beard hair that you have right now. So that's something that you would call terminal hair. So it's a little scragglier. And then you have vellus hair, which is what I have on my arm right here. So it's more like, that kind of fuzz that, that a woman would have on her arms, and some men do too, just based off of whatever, their biology. Right. So I start going on hormones and things starts changing. Your breasts start changing, your hips start changing, your skin and your face and all this sort of stuff. You start redistributing fat into different areas. And here's one thing, if I have other trans women, other trans girls that are watching this, start fucking eating. Otherwise that won't happen, all right? I made that mistake. But anyways, I just want to put one out there for the girls. Because a lot of young women don't do that.
Okay.
And so things progressed and my body starts changing. I actually kind of for like simplicity's sake, I switched from doing oral estrogen. So I would take a pill twice a day. It dissolves under your tongue. Spironolactone is a pill that you take with water and you swallow it. So then I start actually taking injectable estradiol.
Okay.
That I can't remember my milligram dose, but it doesn't really matter. And that's just easier for me, frankly, because it's a subcutaneous injection. I do it once a week. It's like 0.1 milliliters or something like that. And yeah, I just have to do it once a week rather than having to remember every single day to take this too. And it was easier for me because like I would take it when I got in the car to go to work and when I left to come home.
Right.
So following that, and I do that for quite some time, and then 2020 hits, and it was a long decision. I think a lot of people who transition have these questions about like, do I want to go under the knife for anything?
Right.
And some of that is based off of like one's own desires, some of that. And there's like a lot of like meditation and internal thought that you have to do of like, do I want to do this, or do I think I want to do this because this is what I see in other women or other men or whatever.
Right.
So I decided to pull the trigger. I decided like I want to get facial feminization surgery.
Okay.
I want to get top surgery. And those are the two things that I started with.
Okay. Top surgery meaning?
Breast augmentation.
Okay.
So for most trans women, that means a breast augmentation, which
Okay.
includes like a breast augmentation that you would have for a cisgender woman.
Right.
So like putting in like an implant.
Okay.
And I started working with a surgeon, and I already had a doctor that was at Vanderbilt. And we went through it. There was a lot of meetings about it. I went to the doctor so much, and I still have to go to the doctor fairly regularly. And yeah, eventually. And then while this process was happening, it was something that I really weighed in my head of like, do I want to get bottom surgery?
Right.
And that's a huge decision
and
because
bottom meaning
cut
off the penis. Or,
we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I was meditating.
Gave me the chills.
We'll get into it. If you want to say uncle first, we can.
No, I'm just
okay?
thinking of like, oh man.
Yeah. So I started having these like thoughts and dreams and just like trying to go through it, and then eventually I was like, I have to do this. Like, if I'm gonna go through so much like difficulty and thought and all this sort of stuff, like I need to actually like pull the trigger and do this.
Right.
Mind you, we're talking February of 2020. Right. So that's I start scheduling surgeries, and I was initially scheduled for a breast augmentation and facial feminization surgery for April. And then the pandemic hit and everything shut down, and my surgeries started getting moved, and I was absolutely miserable because I was just like, I'm so fucking close. I'm so close to getting the things that I want.
Right.
And then eventually we were able to, I was able to get a date. And because it's funny, because I went to Vanderbilt, cosmetic surgery is actually a way that they are able to keep the lights on, because it's very, very expensive, and most insurance programs don't cover it. So people have to pay out of pocket, which means a lot of money, a lot of just cold hard cash for them. And that's the case for a lot of insurances, including mine. So I do it, and I decided like, it's May. This is only ever going to get worse. I talked to my doctor, and I was like, can we do this whole face thing and chest thing at the same time? And he's like, how old are you? I'm like, well, I'm 28. And he's like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. And, I went under the knife, and then I woke up, and, I had a much more ample chest, and I had a massively swollen face. I mean, if you did your research, then you likely have seen my Instagram, which we can talk about in a little while.
Yeah.
But then it was having to go through for the next part, because the next thing was in July, I was supposed to have my bottom surgery. Fun thing about bottom surgery, it is extremely expensive. which is a huge reason why I tried to raise a lot of money. And it involves a lot of stuff that even people within the medical field don't tell you. So it involves hair removal. So hair removal being that you need to remove hair from the parts that are going to be, let's say, inverted.
Right.
And what that means is then you have to get either laser hair removal or electrolysis. Now, electrolysis is the only FDA-approved way to get hair removed because laser hair, for some people, it will eventually grow back, and you don't want that growing back inside of you. And that could be a huge problem. Like it genuinely could cause a lot of issues. So you have to do electrolysis. So for those who don't know, electrolysis is the process in which that you have a technician and they go into every single little hair follicle with a needle, and then they heat that needle up to a very high degree so it cauterizes that pore. And I want to tell you, I'm a pretty tough bitch. That is the most painful experience of my entire life.
Yeah, that sounds painful.
Yeah. And
every hair follicle?
Every single one. Every single one. All over your junk.
Oh.
Like I said, I'm a tough bitch. But that one, and it's really hard, especially in Tennessee, to find somebody that will even do it.
Right.
I found a woman who would do it. It was very difficult because...
And you had to be awake for this?
Oh, yeah. And I was fucking raw dogging it the first time. And I had booked a 3-hour session. I was like, let's just do it because it was going to take a long time to do all of this. And I was like, let's just do it. And 1 hour in, I was like sobbing, just like crying my eyes out, just in like pure like nerve pain, like that electric throbbing, sharp pain. And I went back and we basically reached this conclusion, like, we're going to go down time, and then it just got worse and worse and worse, and how painful it was, and we didn't even get to the hard parts. So I had to do a shitload of research, and once I started doing that research, there are places across the country that will do twilight anesthesia. So essentially they will give you an IV, and you'll have this sort of like foggy, hazy, like, you're essentially like not making memories.
Okay.
And at the same time, they inject you with a numbing solution.
Okay.
And keep in mind where we're injecting this numbing solution into.
Yeah.
Real fucking painful.
Ooh.
So I have to do that. I had to do that 4 times. Once again, very expensive.
Right.
Insurance doesn't cover it, and most places don't take insurance. So once you do that, and have the okay from your doctor. I had to go to Chicago, which I went to Chicago. I was in basically like a very high level of quarantine all of the summer of 2020. And as an organizer, I was fucking rended about that. And at a distance, I did the best that I could in assisting, whether it is providing money for mutual aid, making masks for people, also doing like radio safety, so like listening to police scanners and transmitting that to people on the ground. I did the best that I could with what I had because I needed to have this surgery, and I needed to not have COVID because then it was going to be like, we have to delay your surgery at least by a month.
Right.
So then come August 8th of 2020, went under the knife again. And yeah, woke up, spent a week in the hospital, came home, and I had to have three revisions? Two revisions.
Okay.
So what that means is they go down there again and they adjust some stuff.
Okay.
I actually had one earlier this year in March. And fully recovered. It takes fully recover from your first surgery without any revisions or anything like that. It'll take about a year.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just for clarity, so like nuts gone.
Gonzo. Somebody's got him in a lab somewhere. Actually, it's funny.
That's wild to me. That's so wild to me.
I got to tell you, it's the best decision I ever made in my goddamn life. I was like so tortured over this choice, and then when I woke up, and you have like a vacuum seal on you to like prevent any sort of things from falling out and like
Right.
bleeding or anything like that. And then
Right.
like because I had it on a Monday, so come Thursday they took it off and they're like, we need to go through this dilation process, which we can talk about. And they were like, we're gonna take this off, and we're just gonna make sure everything's good, and then we're gonna leave for about 5 minutes so you can have your moment.
Right.
And I did. They checked to make sure everything was okay, and I just sort of, they gave me a mirror because like I'm in a hospital bed, not able to walk.
Right.
And even there where it was like bruised and bloodied and like, you know, still with like the Sharpie on it and shit like that, I just broke down crying. So I broke down crying in the hospital, and it was just such a alleviate. I didn't realize how much of that was a weight on me, and I had to just like it really made me just so overjoyed, just like this pure white ecstasy of just like, I can't believe I made the right choice.
Right.
Because there's not really any coming back from that. You know? You know what I mean? I mean, we can get into the surgical, like we can get into the logistics and the geometry of the whole thing if you want, but
I think we got the picture. I think
all
we got
right. I mean, the whole, there's some things preserved, and there's things that, you know, nothing gold can stay.
So with this transition, is it something that you will be experiencing your entire life, or is it a point where, like, hey, everything is good to go, you've done everything, you don't have to take any more type of medicine or estrogen or anything like that, or will it be just ongoing for life?
Honestly, it depends on the person.
Okay.
So at this point in time right now, like some people stop taking estrogen altogether. Like, and at this point in time, like I feel like I want to keep taking it.
Okay.
Despite the fact that I don't have any like, in terms of anatomy, genital anatomy, anything that produces that anymore.
Right.
But it helps me a lot. I still take spironolactone just for like hair growth and stuff like that, because like basically anything else that I would want to get done, like my skin's really sensitive, so it would just leave a lot of scars.
Do you feel any, like, or did you start to feel any different, like, from a like strength standpoint?
Strength standpoint?
Yeah, or like just, you know.
From the beginning of the transition?
Yeah, from the beginning to now, or yeah.
Yeah, like I have like I've been a runner like for the majority of my life.
Okay.
And I still do that. Like, some stuff has changed. Like there's.
I'm glad you told me that.
Told me what?
That you was a runner, that you was an athlete.
Yeah.
Because we have to talk about it.
Of course we do.
We got to talk about it.
And we gotta dig into it.
And being an athlete yourself, like, I gotta know.
Of course, we'll get into it in just a moment. But in terms of like strength, like, yeah, things did change.
Okay.
Like there are parts of your body that just feel different. And what you can chalk that up to, like, you can't really know. And whether or not that they're like, it's not like I run any better because I started taking estrogen. It's not like I lift any better because I was on testosterone. Like, to me, like, some of that stuff changes, but like I run. I used to lift. I used to be like really into powerlifting. But I stopped having a gym that I could go to because gyms are expensive. And like, I never really like, I would go to the gym at like 4 a.m. So it's not like there's anybody fucking there.
Right.
And I would go to a gym like as I was now. Like, I, used the women's bathroom. Like, I swam, like everything like that before I had bottom surgery too.
Right.
So yeah, in terms of like strength and stuff like that, it to me, like, because I'm a runner, like, it's hard to say whether much changed. But overall, I would say like likely my amount of like, I would say like my overall strength probably decreased. And there's good and bad to that. Like,
Right.
but I keep up with it. I run 5 days a week, get up, ass crack of dawn.
Do you, if you were to compete with a cis woman,
Yeah.
same age, you all both had same level of experience in
Sure.
a particular sport, do you think you would have an advantage over her because you was assigned male at birth
And went through.
Yeah.
No, I
Okay.
don't think so.
Okay.
Because like there are arguments about like things like musculature and like bones and stuff like that, and scientifically, like that's not exactly true. Like,
Okay.
even like there's like kind of a insult that a lot of like prejudice and bigoted people like to lob at trans people of just saying like in the future when they discover your bones they're going to know that you were a man. No, they're not. That's not how examination of bones work or
But
anything.
it would be like
that.
DNA though, right? Wouldn't that determine like
Maybe.
And I guess let's use the correct type of. They would know their sex.
They would know their sex. Perhaps.
They would know their
Perhaps.
sex. Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of like overall strength, like I don't think so. Like
Okay.
there are instances where like transgender women will start competing against other women, other cisgender women, and sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't. And a lot of the times it does depend on like testosterone production, or it does depend on just like overall fitness or skill or things like
Genetics.
that. Genetics, things that you have literally no control over. Like I often tell people that like I likely have more estrogen at any point in time during the day than like 95% of women in the world. And there's just nothing that we can do about that other than, if I were to cut off the estrogen, like that wouldn't even change because I've already, gotten rid of the thing. We're just going to have to come back to it when we talk about this shit. So I'm perfectly upfront. You don't know how many times I've had to talk to other trans women about this. So I'm glad that I get to talk to people in a more public setting where it's not as like intimate or something like that.
Yeah, and
when it comes to sports, like you're asking about, like there are instances where yes, that does become the case, like where there are trans women who do really well against other women, and there are some trans men who do really fucking well too.
And you don't hear, and that's the thing.
But nobody talks about
the
trans men.
Yeah,
It's bullshit.
Which is crazy because
Right?
and I wonder why not.
So here we're gonna have to get into some like 4-dimensional transphobia right now. I mean this very literally, because like you have to imagine it from like a transphobic society's perspective of like a transphobic society does not see me as a woman. Like we just have to understand this. We have to start at that base.
Right.
They don't see me as a woman. They see me as a man. And with that being the case, with societal attention being more upon men than women generally, then all of a sudden you have all of this attention on all of these like queers who are like invading women's spaces and like, these like disgusting human beings who are like in the same way. And like this goes with any sort of oppressed group. When your oppressor starts talking about both how weak and strong you are, it's kind of a good indicator about what the hell's going on.
Right.
So yeah, people don't talk about trans men enough. I firmly believe that. People don't do enough fucking science about trans men enough. Like not enough medical science. It's really, really unfortunate. Like I'm pretty sure that there's not a surgeon at Vanderbilt yet that does a penoplasty, so like the creation of a penis on somebody. And that is because we live in a transphobic society, so that's not something that's just as valued.
Yeah, I wonder how that would work.
That's not my area of expertise.
I'm just kidding.
That's not my area of
Like,
expertise.
okay.
You can find a trans man, maybe. I mean, it would.
I would love. Hey, if there's a trans man that's listening and out there, or if a listener knows one, please, like, there's a seat waiting for you on Deep Dish to
Absolutely.
talk about that because it's I don't know.
It's important.
Yeah, it's important, but also like just to hear that experience, hear to hear like the same thing that you're breaking down to us.
Yeah.
From him would be amazing.
And
informing and all of that good stuff. So
I know about a lot of this shit because like I've had to experience.
Right.
I've had to like be the other person on the side of an argument.
Right.
I've had to stand up for myself in a lot of ways, whether it be with, just on the street, in relationships, whether that be like, well, not any of like the romantic relationships that I've been in, but like with medical companies, all sorts of different places, like with IT and shit like that. So
let's get into the relationships.
Let's go.
I'm curious.
It. Yeah.
And so as a transgender woman, are you bisexual? Man and
I'll
woman?
fuck them all, brother.
Okay.
Like,
okay. All right.
As long as they're smart, funny, attractive, like I'm engaged, so I'm off the market. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But yeah, I dated people of every gender.
Okay.
If you've got what I like, then
okay.
Then okay. I'm not a shrinking violet. That's for sure.
How in the past when you was on the market, how did that conversation like happen? Say there was a cis man that liked what they saw, did not know you were a transgender woman, just thought you was a woman. Is how does that happen? And has that happened? And what was the response to that? Or what were some of the responses to that?
It's interesting, of course, which is one of my least favorite words because it could literally mean anything.
Right.
But you get myriad different things. So there were times that there is like a constant conversation about whether or not you need to disclose to a partner about whether like you're trans.
Okay.
And I think that for me, I always would, and purely out of a safety concern.
Okay.
Because I knew that do you know about the trans panic defense? Are you familiar with this?
I'm not.
So there are several instances, and this is still the case across this country. There was one that happened, I believe, last month, where a trans woman was killed by I should say that again. He murdered a trans woman that he was having a sexual relationship with. They had been having sex quite a bit.
Right.
And his case was that he was in a panic because he felt like he had been deceived. So he got off the case.
He did not know.
He beat the case. He said he didn't know. You're having fucking sex.
Yeah,
right. You can see it. You can see it.
Unless it was just oral. I don't know.
But here's the thing.
I don't know if he said
that is perfectly legal to murder a trans woman as part of what is known as the trans panic defense. That happens all the time. So that to me is the safety concern because I don't want to go on a date with somebody. I don't want to go on a date with a man. And we start getting intimate, and then all of a sudden he's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. I would prefer.
Sure.
And I believe. If a man or woman, depending on
sure
which side you're on, if you get the inclination that he or she believes you're a woman or a man, and like a cis woman or cis man, and you are not, I think it's responsible for not only yourself, for them too, so they can have the ability to choose. That's my preference on it.
I also think that cisgender people should tell transgender people what they're working with.
I'm for that too.
Just so you know,
right.
I do have a penis in case there was a question.
Right? Yeah.
Because
I'm for it. I'm for all of that.
There are some of course. There's some fucking banging folks on both sides, but there's some trans men that look like that in our transphobic society, literally nobody would ever clock them. Literally.
Well, let me tell you, I had the chance to live in the Philippines for a month.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think that may have been my first time where I physically seen like in my presence
Sure.
Trans men. Am I saying that right? Trans women.
Okay.
Trans women that you would never know. Never, and it was this thing to where I had some Filipino local like friends and colleagues that were literally like warning me like, hey, like that's she's a woman, but you know she was born.
Just so you know what you're working
Yeah, just I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, and so that was I was like, this is it was mind blowing because it was like, wow, the transition. I was like, wow, how, like, and if you don't explicitly ask, it's no way that like it's no way that you would that anybody could know.
We're out walking among you and you wouldn't even know. You wouldn't even know.
So, which is amazing. That
because maybe they reached their goal.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
that's what they wanted.
like that's amazing. Like that's a masterful work. But then it's like, sheesh, like would you tell me? Like, right? Would you tell me? Which is could be scary too at the same time.
Yeah, I think that I'm not going to make a decision for anybody, but I will say safety as a trans person is paramount, and that's something that all of us need to be aware of. Right. That you might be, if you're in a one-night stand with somebody, if you're in a relationship with somebody, like, it might be in your best interest, but if somebody doesn't, and I'm not gonna be like, you did the wrong thing, or like, even if this person was, you know, God forbid, like, had some violence acted upon them, like, I don't think they did the wrong thing. I think the person that did the violence did. So
I look at it the same way as, like, honestly, like STDs. Like, if you have an STD, and you know it, you might want to disclose that if you're about to have some type of.
In some places, it's illegal.
Yeah, which is, and then and you know, or you could do what you can just ask that maybe uncomfortable question, like, hey, have you tested?
Clean?
Are you clean?
Yeah.
Which I think is a very responsible question.
I'd
ask
every single one of my partners that.
Right. But like, you know,
clean?
yeah, but I think some people, like, just because of discomfort of asking it and how it could shift the mood, maybe ignore it and then like, shit, what happened? You know, or just, you know.
I mean, it's the same thing that, like, we as, well, I'll say, I won't broadly say for the rest of the world. I say that we as Americans have a very uncomfortable relationship with gender, with sexual relationships, obviously with sex, and, you know, everything else. But those things to this conversation specifically, and I think in terms of, like, trans people, like, it is in possibly your best interest, because things are hard out there for us, that you want to keep your safety paramount, and just, if they have an issue with it, then they are not the type of person you would want to fuck anyways.
And so I want to get into some community stuff.
Shoot.
Around trends and allyship and solidarity, and kind of what that looks like. And I want to paint this picture because I see it like it's that us versus them, right? Yeah. And a perfect example of this is, or a sentiment of this is, you have this big movement from the gay community, queer, transgender, lesbians, you know, plus ... Yeah. And then you have on the other side could be black issues, right? Sure. And then you could have gay black issues all intertwined in that, right? And you might have some folks that put their gay status ahead of their black status. And then that's a thing, like, oh, you should, you know, and so when we talk about multicultural organizing, I think multi-ethnic, multi-gender, all of those things, how have you seen that work, not work, and things that we can work on in that space where it's not a us versus them, but it can be very easy, especially when we all trying to have ask and demands met.
Yeah.
We even may see society pulling one way and not the other. And I just believe this wholeheartedly. Anything that just pure blackness, this country has a problem with.
Anything to what now?
This pure blackness, this anti-blackness.
Oh yeah, no, this is a white supremacist country
in this country.
from head to toe.
And I think too that's why many persons I like to attach other things to that blackness because they feel they'll get heard if instead of it just purely on just their race and their blackness and being an African American, Black American. So with all of that.
Examples, how do we overcome?
What have you seen? How do we overcome that? How do we build true solidarity around organizing? And what real questions should we all be asking and acknowledging? Like this exists. We need to do some work internally too in order to be able to effectively build organizing.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about with there is just a prism that everybody goes through when it comes to how their identities and the different marginalized identities that they might be a part of. And yeah, I have absolutely seen, we were just saying, we live in America, we live in a racist country. We live in a sexist country. We live in a capitalist country. All of these things are just inherent and necessary for America as we know it to function. Our entire society, in the founding of this country, it was built upon the backs of stolen African people. And it cannot be ignored. It's in the soil, it's in the air that we breathe. And to try and brush that aside is a component of prejudice. It's a component of racism. And we should never shy away from examining the way that those things function. And yeah, I think that there is a problem with racism in every single community, regardless. And I think in terms of the queer community, there are people who are white in the queer community, and it is super easy for white people to be racist, and it is often of course you don't even, in some cases you don't even realize that you're doing it. Right. And there are gay people that are explicit white supremacists. That doesn't, right. I made this joke at a training that I was doing this past weekend that, queer folk ain't kinfolk. And that's something that you really have to keep in mind, because there's some queer people that I absolutely disagree with, not even, that, whether it be upon political lines, organizing lines, and some people that I just find fucking annoying. Right. So in terms of ways that I've seen that this have gone bad, I think there is definitely the case of the ignorance around the issues that let's say Black trans women face, in embodying this sort of multiple intersectioning identities. I've seen the way that even in social justice circles, the way that if say a Black trans woman, is how should I say this? Errs in some way, maybe says something wrong, maybe says something that's rude or what is perceived to have been mean or something like that. Just the brigades of people come in just to criticize and pick apart and just torment, literally torment, to the point where that person might completely disengage into any of the work that they might be doing. And every single time that we do that, we lose we lose a soldier in the class war. Right. And that's something that we need to be cognizant of, and we need to understand that we can have political disagreements. Right. We can be in the same political organization, have political disagreements. I don't need to be friends with the people that I organize with. I don't need to be friends with the people that I do politics with. Right. And that's something that you need to always keep in mind, that maybe people have this weird thing, and I don't know if it's just American, that it's just like, it just take the L. Like, just admit, like, just shut your mouth and just, maybe you were wrong, or like maybe you need to be the person to like shut up and listen. Like, there have definitely been times where like I've overstepped my bounds. Like, I've said something that I didn't realize was that I didn't realize I was racist. I made a joke that was a little too off color, and that it hurts, not only like hurts somebody's feelings, but like touched into a part of their identity, their ancestry, their history, that really wounded them. And I will freely admit that that has happened. And I have done my best personally, I hope, to make amends in those sorts of ways. But I know that like none of us are immune from hurting other people. And like, I think especially like there is such a complicated conversation to have around when you are a member of a marginalized identity, of the way that you are both feminized and masculinized, of seeing like you're this brute and at the same time you're this weakling, and it goes throughout just throughout history. You know, you have included with that, you know, you have like the impression of indigenous people, the erasure of indigenous cultures, all this sorts of things. Now, to your question about how we solve this,
solve might be too much of a strong word.
Address.
Yeah, address.
Address.
How do we confront?
How do we take a stab at this?
Right.
I think being more, just once again, just take the L. Just is the fight that you're getting into with this other person around the thing that you said, is it truly worth it when they are expressing that the thing that you said hurt you?
Right.
I think people really need to learn how to fucking apologize, and stop like doubling back and being like, well, I'm sorry that you feel this way, or like, I'm sorry that my words hurt you. It's like, you can construct an apology a little bit better than that. But I think people need to do a lot of political education, and I think that should be done not just on one's own. I think that needs to be done collectively in the way that we change our ideas, because there are a lot of people on the left who kind of, you know, turn away from anything that could be like even be considered like class politics.
Right.
And just saying like it's all class, it's class, or turn away from they turn away from identity politics in favor of singularly class politics.
Right.
Now, class politics, very important, cannot be cut out of any of this. However, we do have to keep in mind and actually do a orientation for folks, and I bring up this quote all the time. It is by Walter Rodney, who's this amazing, I believe he's a Trini author.
Okay.
And he wrote this book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And he's quoting C.L.R. James, and C.L.R. James is going through this thing talking about imperialism and the way that class interacts with it and the way that race interacts with it. And Rodney puts out this after he finishes quoting James, and says, you know, it can be expanded further to say that the capitalist class, from like the beginning of the United States of America, at some points in time would prioritize white supremacy, like the punishment, the imprisonment, the slavery of black people over the profit motive of capitalism. They would go out of their way. They would make less profit just so they could keep African people, black people. They could keep all other what they had seen not white people, just with another weight on their back, despite the fact that it would have been in contravention to their profit motive.
Right.
And that's something that I think we always need to keep in our head, is sometimes they will go out of their way. Because like, it is great for capitalism to have more consumers. Like, it's great to have all of this. You know, that's how they make their profit. That's how they have, workers in the factories and on the streets and all this sort of stuff. But sometimes they will, in fact, go out of their way to stoke animus and to oppress. And we see that through, our Republican and Democratic parties. I can't remember who did this. I think it was Kwame Ture, of saying like, the United States is a has a one party government, but in typical American fashion, they have two of them.
That sounds about right. Yeah, no, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. I don't know.
I don't think that I adequately answered your question.
I think you did. Okay. I think you did. I think you gave like great examples from a us versus them type of thing, and also just from a solidarity and how do we build that, but also what's preventing solidarity too.
Yeah, I had somebody ask me the other day about like building a tenant union or like building a labor union of like. There is a clear history within at least the labor movement of homophobia. Like we can't get around like that. There's a clear history in the labor movement of racism, of like what do you do when there's somebody who is in your union who is on the workers' side purportedly, that is being transphobic, is being homophobic, is being racist, and it's like you need to call that out. You need to neutralize his or her ability to do that.
Right, and they might be unaware.
Exactly.
And they may be unaware, and I think that's what helps calling it out. Because if a person is unaware, they would never just be aware, and so they need to have that called out. And then if they really want to be an ally and help and support and grow, they'll do the internal work and accept that. And if that means even sitting down or being in the back for a while and figuring that out, they'll do that.
Yeah, I think it's important especially in like organized situations to have something like a code of conduct, something everybody can see, something you can refer to and being like, hey, this is something that's a part of what we are doing, and your violation of that is alienating this person, and we need as many people in this as we can. Right.
Yeah, no.
And maybe through struggle they'll come to understand it, or maybe they won't.
Well, and that's where like capitalism comes into play, especially with oppressed, marginalized folks. It's because it's like, we need money.
It thrives on it
in this country, right? We need money to organize. We need money to. We need to be able to buy resources or get resources. We have to solicit grants or whatever it may be, and to do this work, which I think conflicts with many organizing tactics and methods and ideologies, because you have to do it in this system, which tell you, you can do it depending on the level, depending on the level that you do it depends on the amount of money that you have to be able to do it at, right?
It's hard. Like, I'm a completely volunteer organizer. I've never been paid a dime to do any of this, and I wish I had been, but
and I don't believe in like the broke organizer either. Because you. Like, it's reality, It's like we need organizers to be housed. We need organizers to be able to eat and have health insurance and all of these things to be whole so they can do the work at the highest and best level.
Like, I work a 45-hour-a-week job. There have been recent weeks where I've clocked over 40 hours organizing. Doing one thing or another. So I've been working 85 hours, and it's like...
And we appreciate your dedication. Because
we got a world to win.
We got to work. Yeah,
we got a world to win.
We got to work because whatever the opposition may be for any particular person, they're working just as hard for whatever ideology, agenda that they are trying to push and spread out there in the world. Action steps for a person to better understand the trans community, be an ally, to really just action steps for people to reflect and once they listen to this conversation and hear your lived experience and your journey and the gems that you have been able to give us, what are some action steps that listeners and viewers could take that are positive, not harmful action steps.
Sure, yeah.
But that are positive and could move them forward and maybe something that they're not completely comfortable with, but want to get comfortable with and have a closer proximity to as well?
Well, first of all, jump into the DMs.
Slide them DMs.
Yeah, I'm not a mother. I can't be one, and they won't let people like me adopt. But I do like to. I have been referred to as a den mother. So
Okay.
I promise that is an open invitation. If somebody would like to ask a question of me, then please feel free to reach out. I will do my best to answer questions. I'm not an omnipotent source, but I genuinely mean that. You can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Twitter or whatever. If you need something like that, I'm actually thinking. I was having a conversation with somebody this weekend, and I might start doing this for my chapter, maybe small scale, of just literally having, in a similar way that we're doing now, of just like closed door. Registration only, frisking at the door, of just like literally come in here, ask me literally any grisly question that you have. And whether or not that's good or bad, I've never seen literally anybody do that. So I figured why not take a crack at it? I just talked to a man on a podcast about how I got my dick cut off. So it's kind of like the cat's out of the bag.
Mina, I really believe that there needs to be more spaces, and they're really brave and safe spaces and civil where community can really come and ask these daunting questions and things that they're really thinking that are crazy, but they're curious and they want to know, and they have good intentions.
I do not want people. If you got to learn it, I'd rather you learn it from me. Mm-hmm. So if you need somebody who is safe, if you need somebody who's going to be gentle, I'm not gonna we're gonna have a level of respect here. I do literally answer every direct message that I get, so watch out for that. It's fun. Sometimes you get some fun folks, but I would say on top of I will put myself out there as a resource. Mm-hmm. I think if you're really trying to I think if you're doing some isolated type of political education, because be clear, this is political education. Right. You're trying to raise your consciousness to something that you don't know a lot about, right. And it's okay to not know a lot about shit. Right. I have been told from a young age to today that I'm not terribly smart, but I work hard, and that's okay.
Right.
And I would say I think it is important to read or listen to podcasts. I don't really have many podcasts about trans stuff because I kind of am one, but
maybe you should start one. Maybe because we need that.
If you want to invite me on another time, if there's any future projects, please reach out. I'm happy to be a part of any sort of thing.
Because I think
I'm such a ham that I am willing to talk on the microphone whenever.
Well, because I think it's I don't identify with everything, so it's it'd be irresponsible for me not to invite folks like yourself and others that are a part of communities that I'm not a part of. I might be an ally, but I'm not a part of in a personal, intimate way. Yeah. And this is how I grow. This is how I explore and learn and just get other diversities of thoughts about other things. So you'll definitely be back.
Yeah.
You're definitely coming back.
Absolutely. More than I'm very flattered to even be here, I should say. I would say, I think it's really important to read. I think it's important to kind of sit there and process stuff. I didn't get to tell the story about when I knew, but I will say a huge part of my own political education as a part of this was even just learning history, even just learning that this idea of transitioning is not new. There is a long down to ancient beginning of history, tradition and cultural phenomenon as such a thing as transitioning. I mean, it was in the Americas, it was in Europe, it was every single continent had this. And that was important to me. I can't tell you why, but it was. I find, and the book that really changed that for me, it's actually quite a slim little thing. It was originally called The Gay Question. It was written by Bob McCubbin. I believe now it's called Roots of Lesbian and Gay Oppression, A Marxist View, which sounds intimidating, but it's actually quite easy to read. Right. And I think that it's hard because like there are a lot of like liberal resources that I feel like are inadequate even to understand this. And I think that there is kind of a gap in terms of like actual leftist, socialist, Marxist, whatever you want to call it, like explanations of these things. So you're not alone out there if you find yourself like not finding resources. Right. And I think it does take people searching and it takes people talking. And I'm not going to put that type of work. I want to be explicit here. I don't think every trans person should do stuff like this. Like, right. I think that it can be enervating. I think it can be exhausting for some people. I love talking about myself and have zero shame anymore because I've been through a lot. Right. And I think it's important to be kind, which is not to say that having boundaries isn't being kind, but right. Yeah, I think you should search for resources. I think you should, there are things at like LGBTQ centers, like the Oasis Center is good if you're wanting to look for local stuff. And it also kind of like depends on the type of resources because some of it can be historical, some of it can be scientific, some of it can just be, cultural or something like that. It's... I don't know. I'm a big movie head. I like a lot of that stuff. So if you've never seen, well, this is not specifically about trans women. I think it is about a culture. There are two movies that I would recommend. One is called Paris is Burning, which I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am familiar with that.
Yeah, it's great film, great documentary. I think it's extremely powerful in just learning about the struggles, the beginning of like drag culture, about the oppressions that people face in a very like raw and real way. There's also this documentary called Check It. I never hear like a lot of people talk about it, but it is a documentary about a gang in DC, and it is a queer gang. Okay. And it arose out of a lot of queer women, whether they be trans, whether they be lesbian, like femme lesbians or butch lesbians or whatever, just getting the shit kicked out of them. And they kind of like they effectively decided like we need a form of community defense for our community. So right. They like literally like calling it a gang is hard, but like there are videos of them just jumping somebody who tried to kick the shit out of one of their sisters and just beat the fuck out, like a right. World Star video. But I think it is an important film to watch because you see the lengths at which people go to, the things that people suffer, and stuff like that. I think doing that type of research, just start educating yourself, start having these thoughts. Right. Like I said, I'm open. I know the Oasis Center is there. I know like the Casey Potter Center is there. I know the local GSA is here. I don't really know how terribly active they are. Okay. But those are all different organizations that could provide you some stuff. But always have an eye out there for things like racism, things like sexism, or just purely capitalism. Like, right. I don't need rainbow capitalism. I don't give a fuck about Tim Cook or anything like that. I don't care that he's gay. He's still right. he's still a member of the oppression class, the right. oppressor class. Yes. So that's what I got for you. Hopefully, I can provide more in the future.
Yeah. Look, you gave us a masterclass. Oh, you really did. And like, I'm pretty sure I asked some questions that everybody would just really want to know in the process. But also just thought provoking. I think just being able to just think about things differently, sex, gender, transitioning, what that looks like, what's that process like for a person that goes through that, and also just like being knowledgeable and aware about other people's like struggles and things they have to like carry and still try to show up as themselves every day. And how difficult it be when you can't show up as yourself. Because of a system, because of a workplace, because of safety, danger, all of these things. And so I appreciate you sharing all those elements of your story and connecting it back to community and connecting it back to how we can, like connecting back how you can be a resource to other community members to have that conversation and in a respectable way, but be open and non-judgmental. And so thank you. Mina, for being who you are, standing on business, as we say, and just like doing the work. And so thank you. And you're now a part of that esteemed group of people that have sat in that chair and that have just gave us a masterclass. And I know this is going to reach a lot of people.
It feels like a throne at this point.
No, like it's going to, I know
there's a lot of people who I deeply respect who have been on this podcast.
Well, and you know,
I look forward to more folks.
I'm pretty sure it's mutual from the other end. And I just appreciate everybody that has been on, and now you that just open up and be vulnerable and allow me to be vulnerable. Allow me to admit some things. Allow me to say, hey, this is where I was. I don't know everything. That's why you're here to teach me so I can learn and grow. And so, and just looking around and realizing like, hey, like my proximity to this particular community is like hundreds of miles away. Let me bring them closer so I can understand and I can be better. Lastly, I want like how can people, I know you said sign them DMs. How else can people like reach you? Email or is DMs the best way? And is there any last punchline that you want to leave with us?
Yeah, great question. I'd give out my phone number, but that's sometimes where the death threats come from. And I don't got a burner, but
I wouldn't
not anymore.
I wouldn't give your phone number out.
Okay, fair enough.
Your handle. What's your handle on social?
So my Twitter account, my Twitter account is, well, actually, I start with Instagram because I answer a good bit more DMs from there, and you can actually see that's, we didn't get to talk about it, but that has been a 5-year project at this point of just like I take a picture of myself every single day, and if you go through, I did make a video of stringing together every single one from the first day that I started transitioning to May of this year. Oh, wow. So you get to see a 4-year total every single day transition of not just when I have a good day, but every single day.
Now we all gonna go and look.
Yeah, go for it. I need more TikTok views. I did put it on my Instagram too.
Okay.
But yeah, on Instagram, I believe my handle is just my middle name. It's just Laszlo, but the @ is unlovingly your wife.
Okay.
And then my Twitter is Screwball Detector, because there's a lot of them out there. So you can look that up. Okay. I think detector is spelled DETCTR or something like that, because the real one was taken, unfortunately. But yeah, you can hit me up on there. Like I said, I answer every single DM. So if one of you freaks out there want to DM me, trust me, I will answer, and we can play that game of chicken if you really want to. I'd gladly squeeze a few bucks out of you freaks.
Last thoughts. Any statements you want to leave with this?
We didn't get to talk about the socialism thing, but I think everybody should join DSA. Okay. If you're in Nashville or the surrounding Middle Tennessee area, join DSA. Hit us up. Reach out to me, even if it's about that. And yeah, happy to talk about it. And Jerome, I just want to extend a very hearty thanks for you inviting me on here once again. Sure. It is an honor. I feel very flattered that you accepted me. So, and frankly, I had a lovely time. You're such a lovely man. I really appreciate it. You're very kind.
I try.
You're also very funny.
I try to be, and look, I accept everybody, kind of, sort of. And look, so look.
There's some people who deserve not to be accepted. I'll put it out there.
I'm gonna accept everybody, but no. Thank you again, Mina, and till next time, because they're going to be a part 2, 3, 4, 5, because I think it's just so necessary. And then when you do your own kind of private events and when you do your podcast and all that stuff, I can be like, yes, she's doing it, and whatever I can do to assist and help build with you, I'm here.
Anytime, any place, happy to sit down, happy to raise hell, happy to give a speech if anybody needs me to do that, like I said. But yeah, great to be on Deep Dish Conversations. Great to be here with Jerome.
Y'all hear that? I'm great. And she's great. And this platform is great.
He is.
Until next time, thanks, Mina, and thank y'all for watching and listening.
Have a good day, everybody.